couple of questions have been popping up. And before we start that too, I wanted to point out today is Thursday, May 21st. We are on with Joanne, Jackie, and Kathy from Sabal Palms is trying to log in here. We are recording this and it will be available and emailed to you guys, and then it will be available on our website and the YouTube channel. What I wanted to do while Kathy's trying to log in is address a couple of questions that have been coming in. I wanted to point out that on Tuesday, Jackie and I did a webinar which is recorded and posted. And that webinar really addressed questions that we have been getting from our clients about various things relating to PPP application process, what's going on, forgiveness. And we definitely encourage you guys to have a listen at that recording from Tuesday. A couple of questions popping up this morning. I wanted to address that while Kathy's connecting. The first one, when is loan forgiveness application due? The application is due with the bank that you applied with, Jody, and it will be due 8 weeks after your loan was received. I think the bank is going to give a little bit more guidance on when the actual due date to submit the application, but you cannot obviously complete the application until your loan period is over. So hopefully that's helpful, and you will definitely hear from your bank as the time gets closer.
The SBA just recently dropped that debt forgiveness application that they're using as their baseline guidance for the banks. The banks may be adopting their own forms of that. So, you know, we're waiting on more interpretation and guidance on how the loan forgiveness will actually be calculated, and Marina will get into that just a little bit. We don't want to hijack Kathy's opportunity once we get her up and running. So that's going to be a whole nother webinar in and of itself. The guidelines for debt forgiveness are going to be different if you are an S corporation versus an independent contractor. So we may even end up breaking up the webinar. Either one portion of the webinar will be S corps and one portion will be independent contractors, or if we feel like it's necessary, we may do them in 2 separate webinars. The application just dropped, but the guidance hasn't. So we will be coming to you with that as soon as we're able. Right now, we just don't have enough guidance. It will do more harm than good at this point. So that's why we haven't brought that to you yet this week, but it will be coming. We haven't forgotten about it. We're knee deep in it. And we understand that people are concerned and frustrated with it. So we're going to be getting on that as soon as we are able with more guidance from SBA.
Yes, the application answered a couple of questions that practitioners had, but like anything else with this level of complexity and this new, it created a lot more questions. So I feel like even more guidance is probably going to be needed. And of course, a lot is going to be left to interpretation. And we just wanted to let you know that we're also talking to other practitioners and listening to other people put on similar types of webinars to just kind of get ideas as to what other practitioners are going to be doing and how they're interpreting all of this. So that's going to be quite important. Let me address a couple of questions that are coming in here. Employee that has been exposed to COVID has to go home and maybe there for a couple of weeks. How will that affect the FTE, the full-time equivalent calculation for PPP? I believe that with her not being able to work for a reason, it's not going to penalize you for not having that person as an employee. So the idea is that there was a reason why that employee was not working. Now, if she is back during the loan period, then you don't have a problem because you had her in the calculation before the loan, and you're going to have her in the calculation when the loan forgiveness. So if she's coming back, you're not going to have an issue with the FTE calculation. You also are, I guess the only issue you may be having is if you are going to be paying her less than 75% of her wage, so there may be a reduction there. So I think we would have to probably address that, but I don't believe you're going to get penalized in this particular case. Jackie, do you have an opinion about that from everything that we have read?
Yeah, I think as long as they bring them back on before I think the cutoff is June 30th, and the obviously they need to be brought back on during the covered period, if the covered period expires before June 30th. I do think that there's going to be more guidance coming down with regard to those calculations, because I was actually talking with Marina about this a little bit yesterday. There's a lot of different maneuvers that can be made here to work around these reductions, and it's just not totally clear. So I think a lot more of these questions will be answered with further guidance. But yes, the general rule is as long as they're brought back on.
Michelle is asking, hi Michelle, what are covered utilities? We believe at this point that the utilities that are covered are the ones for which you have a contract in place. So it's going to be your electric service, the gas service, the telephone service, and we believe that it's got to be the service under the business name. So for example, if you're using your personal cell phone for work, but your cell phone is not on the business plan, even though you may be able to deduct that cell phone usage for business purposes, let's say a percentage of it, even if it's half, since it is not a contract that your business has with the utility provider, we don't believe that that will go under the loan forgiveness rule. But certainly available for deduction, as it always is. But again, these utilities interpretations have also been a little bit wild. You know, we were just talking about gas on Tuesday, and you know, one of the practitioners was talking about last week that they think filling up gas in the tank is going to be allowed under that, and you know, other interpretations say no, because it's not gas like a utility. You don't have a contract to, you know, for it. So we think it's just, if you've got a contract for a utility provider, then that's got to be it. And again, the contract has to be in place before February 15th of 2020.
And that's for it to be forgivable. So there's really no restriction against the use of utilities that aren't subject to an agreement prior to February 15th for permitted loan purposes. So it goes back to what's forgivable versus permissible.
What's allowed.
And the gas that the only indication we've had that gasoline in a business vehicle is permitted is as to independent contractors and sole proprietors. But a lot of practitioners are trying to expand that guidance to apply to all companies. But again, it really just goes back to that would only fall potentially under a permitted use versus a forgivable use. And also there's some confusion because under the description of utilities, they include transportation as one of the examples. And I heard a really good example offered by a CPA actually of what transportation was actually speaking to, because that can be a little confusing. Why did they include that if they're not going to allow you to use gas for your vehicles in the forgivable utility expenses? And an example that he offered that was really good is if you are a restaurant and say you have several locations and you use natural gas, they have to transport that natural gas for a fee. So that fee for the transportation of the utilities you use in the operation of your business would be included under the forgivable utility expenses.
Yeah, that does make sense. I think that a good guideline is agreement in place or not. And, you know, my favorite phrase, the devil is in the details. These rules are great, and it gives an opportunity for the business person to be able to use these funds. But when you start digging into the details and the definition, the other thing that I find frustrating is the dates. As Joanne says, the alphabet soup on the dates, where, you know, you're looking at one period for calculating, let's say, even if it's employees, you're looking at different periods for calculating how many employees you had versus different periods to see if you get dinged for not having these full-time equivalents. So there is a little bit of that time frame weirdness. Same thing on the salaries. The salaries that you use as basis for the PPP loan calculation are a little bit different than the salaries you have to test against to see if you had 75% reduction. Those dates are in the instructions to that loan forgiveness calculation. So I think that when we start tackling that with you guys, we will definitely break it down into portions. And again, as more guidance is coming, some of those dates may be changing as well. So I want to make sure not to give you anything misleading or put some different things in there. Jody's asking, what are the guidelines for independent contractors? Oh, I think Kathy's coming in. Good. I feel like there's progress over there. Jody, for independent contractors, as we know right now, essentially the forgiveness, you don't have to move money. If you were on Schedule C, and that's how you applied for your PPP loan, using the net income from your Schedule C from 2019, that is going to be the same thing that's going to be used to figure out the forgiveness. So if you got the max under that, it's likely that that's going to be used for calculation for the forgiveness amount. So the key here is you don't have to move money from the business account to personal account or take money out or take cash out. And again, that applies to independent contractor that was reporting their income on Schedule C and using that Schedule C for calculation. So that addresses that question.
Talk, Marina, real quick about your opinion, or Jackie, about having a separate bank account for your funds. I do feel like we've seen the advice here flip and flop. So where do you guys stand right now on whether folks should move that money to a separate bank account or leave it commingled in with their regular operating funds?
Please, I would say, Marina, would you agree we need to leave that commingled? Not only, I think the main reason is there are very specific uses of the funds that are permitted. You make a certification on the loan that says, I'm only going to use these proceeds for X, Y, and Z. So you will be falsely certifying something on a loan application if you misuse the funds. So if you have it commingled with your other funds, if you make a mistake or misunderstand what the use of funds is permitted, you'll have some other funds in there to sort of offset that mistake. Whereas if you have all of the PPP loan proceeds in a separate account, it's going, a misstep like that is going to be that much more apparent. Would you agree, Marina?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So at the beginning, I think the advice in general was use a separate account because that was going to help you organize really your tracking of the funds and the allowed use of these funds. But because you can make a mistake and pay the wrong bill out of that account, or for example, payroll is really an issue because a lot of entities use a separate payroll account. So it's easy to transfer money back and forth. And then you may transfer entire money, but then remember payroll, it's not all payroll, it's payroll tax, for example, is not part of the forgiveness calculation. So if you're paying your payroll out of that account, you're also paying payroll tax, which is not part of it. So a lot of that confusion may arise because you may say, oh, look, I spent all of my PPP money already. Well, yes, but you also paid payroll tax with it, which is not an expense that you need to be using. You only need to use the gross payroll amount. And so it may get you also a false idea how much you have left in that account to spend to be forgiven. And you get to the forgiveness calculation, and then you had other expenses that were not allowed. So the key here, I think, that use a different method to track the correct funds, whether it's, if you have a QuickBooks, we talked a little bit on Tuesday about the use of different classes in QuickBooks, if you guys have a bookkeeper, have a bookkeeper help you set up and classify those expenses and the PPP loan fund as income, so you can pull a report by class to show what you've spent there. Also, Excel is fantastic. If you just keep track of all of those expenses in Excel spreadsheet, if you've got payroll also in Excel spreadsheet, you can split it up, whether it was payroll tax or pension contribution or salaries, then it will also allow, when you're doing your forgiveness calculation, to just pull out the gross salaries and, let's say, pension and leave the tax alone. So really have a good system of tracking it more so than having a separate bank account. That's for sure. If you already have a separate bank account, that's fine, but don't scramble and rush and get it at this point.
Well, one of the questions that came up with some of our clients too, where people said, look, because of the scramble there at the end of the first round and the beginning of the second round of PPP funding, a lot of people switched banks. So now their PPP funds are at a brand new bank that they've never banked with before.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a lot of people say, like, should I just leave that there? No, please don't leave it there. Then it looks like you're saving it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't continue to run payroll out of your regular account and not be transferring the funds from the brand new bank account to your operating account to cover that payroll and expect to have that considered as you using PPP funds for that. So that was a big scary one that came across my desk yesterday. I was like, oh my gosh.
I got another great question this morning from a client who got a small loan, and she was really concerned with, do I have to give it back? She heard her, even if you're under $2 million spiel, that if you really don't feel like you had the economic necessity and you had the uncertainty, economic uncertainty that these funds were necessary, that even though under 2 million, SBA is not coming to look at you on purpose, they may come and look at you via other means or potentially from an IRS audit. This particular client's PPP loan was small, and I find it hard to, I guess, provide advice, Jackie, to say, likely at this level of loan, you're not going to be looked at closely. I don't think really people are going to be chasing somebody at that low amount, but at the same time, I think if you randomly get audited by an IRS, let's say next year and 2 years from now, and they see that your income was up and you had some of those PPP funds, I'm not sure at this point that there is a threshold to say, well, your loan is too small, don't worry about it. I don't think you're going to get looked at. Maybe we should err on the side of caution and say, if you really, once you receive the loan, still, you may have had economic uncertainty when you applied, but your current conditions are good. You don't have any more projection on economic uncertainty for the rest of the year. Should you give the money back? I think the answer there is yes. Jackie, what do you think?
Yes, I would agree with that. There is no specific guidance that says if your loan amount is below a certain threshold that you're completely immune. The SBA has basically confirmed, and I do feel like that safe harbor is a little misleading. It's not quite as safe as it seems because there's still civil.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Yes,
it's a little bit better harbor.
It is. So we're not going to automatically audit you, but again, that doesn't mean that other agencies will not pursue you if it comes to their attention that you have made that false certification. And if there really truly wasn't a need, I don't know at this point what task forces may be put in place. There's rumors of that. There's rumors of cooperation between SBA and IRS and the Department of Justice. It will be fairly easy for IRS to take a look at a tax return for 2020 and 2019 and see if there's been no change or if there's been an increase in revenue. And if that's the case, and they can verify that the taxpayer received a PPP loan, that may get automatically forwarded on to another agency who digs deeper into this. Now, practically speaking, I mean, I really don't know how much resources are really going to be allocated to this. The other thing that was included in the safe harbor Q&A is that they're trying to encourage PPP borrowers here to take funds that they feel they may need. Now, again, it's clear as mud what that needs to be. They told you to look at your current business activity and your sources of liquidity. So you need to balance those two things. And if you also need to look at your appetite for risk. So if you don't have a strong appetite for risk, I'm in that boat. you might sleep better at night if you just give it back, and then you don't have to struggle and have this argument with yourself. So I think that people just need to really take a close look at their true need for this loan.
Yeah, and the other thing that seems to keep happening is a comparison to TARP with respect to PPP, and that seems to me to be a stretch because TARP was huge institutions and not small, mom and pop type businesses. So I'm not sure that that translates, but I've seen quite a bit of that. Hi there, Kathy.
Oh, you can see? Can you hear?
We can hear you.
All
You were
right.
worth waiting for.
That's today's technology, right?
You know what? It's great when it works, and this is why I try to avoid PowerPoint, because I am the magnet for it to not cooperate that day. So thank you so much for joining us, and welcome. We did start a little bit of our banter without you, but
yeah. I was hearing all the dialogue.
Oh, good.
And I want to concur with all the things that were said, because everything that has been talked about so far are key points to what went on, how to get into the program, and where we are now. And now that we have the initial information to go forward for the forgiveness piece, that's where I kind of wanted to come in and talk about preparing for that. And I'm going to
do that. And first, let me say thank you so much for all of your kind help. For those of you who haven't met Kathy, who are in our local Sarasota area, we've worked with Kathy and her bank for many, many years. And she's been an excellent resource and jumped right into PPP and helped our small businesses in our community who were not existing Sabal Palm Bank customers, and welcome them with open arms. The feedback I've gotten consistently whenever I've emailed your name is immediately I get a reply back that says, thank you so much. She was fantastic. And 2 days later, they're like, I got my money. I'm so excited. So I want to take a minute first to say thank you for taking such good care of our community members, because it's a big job. And I'm sure you feel at this point exhausted and like it may be a little bit of a thankless job, but I assure you your efforts have not gone unnoticed.
Well, thanks, Joanne. And I think that goes hand in hand, because every vendor that we've worked with, all the consultants we've worked with, everyone is feeling the same. And that is like you took a fire hose and tried to put it down, feed yourself with that. It's just been a lot of time and energy. And that's why, number one, I appreciate you having me on, because I think now we have the experience somewhat of what the ups and downs were, what the pros and cons were, and going forward, how can we better implement this piece of what's coming up next? So I do want to concur with the comments that were made, is that this is very preliminary. And as we remember, going into the program originally, there were changes all along the way, right?
Every day.
To say
twice a day.
What we're saying, to so point back to the very beginning, and that was the application. The application changed within days, a new application, right? When the original PPP funds process became available. So I want to just make it clear that what we're talking about today is what we know today.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the application, and the whole purpose of this is to try to forgive the loan. Let's talk about that part of it and how we're going to approach that. So preliminarily, I talk about plan. Let's plan. Best way to be prepared for this 11-page package that is not only available on the Treasury website at ustreasury.gov, it is also available on Joanne's website. Joanne, you've already posted that application, I noticed.
All over the place, wallpapering with it.
We're gonna want a wallpaper with, maybe not. So that application, if you have not looked at it, I encourage everyone who has the PPP loan to print that information out and have it readily available and go through it. Because if you look at that package and think of it in just basically 4 simple sections, which have instructions with each section. I'm going to call this very similar to Joanne and Marina. Everyone will appreciate this. It's kind of like an IRS form. You might want to do your worksheets and your schedules first and then do your application. That's about as simple as I can say it.
That is
Joanne?
absolutely right. That's absolutely correct. And it's, I also noticed, and not to interrupt you, but I also noticed that the instructions and how they have them is a little scrambled. The instruction should go behind the worksheet, but it was in front. So for those of us that are used to IRS forms, you think the instructions are to the other form. So you really got to be very careful when you read whether it's an instruction to the form, schedule, or a worksheet. Good luck.
Good luck.
That is correct. And that's why I say print the form off and understand each of the sections that go along with it. Can I
And pour a stiff drink.
Yes.
Say Thursday at 6, www.sabalpalmbank.com, and watch for the link that we will be putting out. And Neil McCurry, our CEO, will lead an instructional on the application, which I think will be very beneficial for everyone. He's going to do these periodically, at least twice a week. First one is next Thursday at 6. Look for the information to log in, and there will be some information on how to log in and get into our Zoom webinar. So going through that process, that's going to be flat. So my recommendation is pull your first application that you use to submit to your financial institution. Hopefully you saved a copy of it. If you didn't, your lender will probably still have a copy, but I hope everyone made a copy or kept a stored copy of your original application and the documents that you use to support that application. The second thing I would encourage you to do is have your loan documents readily available. Part of this application will ask you for two, and I want to make this very clear, 2 different loan numbers are asked for on that application. Your SBA loan number, which was assigned to you, and the lender's loan number. So 2 key things to pay very close attention to, and that are your loan numbers. One's the lender number and one is the SBA assigned number, which was the authorization that was granted. Going into the next part of the application, we talked, initially reviewing it for thoroughness. I would say also make sure that as you fill in these blanks, if it doesn't apply, even indicate that it doesn't apply in your case, just to keep everything consistent and matching up to what you originally submitted. Where there is a place to sign, don't forget to sign. Where there's a place to date, don't forget to date. And I'm just pointing these key things out because these are all areas that we had repeated, reach back, reach back, reach back, that caused probably in the first round of applications, maybe at another lender, for your application to be rejected because of an incompleteness. Okay, we're all after this to try to get the forgiveness. The, Marina, I think you mentioned this earlier with the 75%, 25% ratio to be considered for forgiveness or other expenses. If for whatever reason there is a for the remaining 22 months of the note that your lender gave you. So I want to stop right there and see if there's any clarifications or points that I can address.
Yeah, Kathy, can you repeat that last sentence? It was scrambling up a little bit. I think it was cutting out and then trying to catch back up.
Okay, so the last part of this is just making sure that the accuracy is there and that 25%, 75% can be accounted for in order to have that forgiveness piece granted. You know, when you look at your note is going to dictate how you repay if there is a portion that is not considered forgiven. Our note might have been different than the note at another bank because there were certain provisions that we could do. So again, refer back to your original documents that your lender sent to you, and that's how you'll know what your repayment is if there is no forgiveness. Remember, the interest rate is nominal.
Yeah.
The interest rate typically on an unsecured loan for business in the state of Florida can be as high as 18%. So I like to make that point because if there is not a forgiveness piece, where can you get a 1% loan for 22 months and have a repayment for that? So I just want to make that point out there to maybe, I don't want to desensitize the forgiveness, but that's the reality of it. If there is a portion, then that's your alternative, is to go by whatever the note said, and that's 22 months worth of repayments, however that was set up according to your lender.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Not only is it unsecured, but there's no personal guarantee. There was virtually no underwriting. Like, this was not a credit-based loan, and it did come through quickly. So we do hope that people are, at least understanding that. I know some of the self-employed independent contractors are a little annoyed that the maximum forgiveness is going to be the $15,735, but even if they took $20,800 and they had $15,000 of forgiveness, you still got $5,000 at 1% at a pretty crucial time where it otherwise would have been difficult to borrow. So
that is true. Very true. The other thing that I heard in the preliminary conversation is your documentation. And of course, Joanne, I know you are an enforcer of documentation.
To a fault.
but the reality is what you're signing and attesting to in your documents is that you are willing to be audited if that were the case. And I'd like to point out there is a specific retention time in the documents. The retention time that was noted in the application that you'll be attesting to documentation. So Joanne, I don't know how that compares to normal.
I would say that's pretty consistent. That's something I would expect that, to see. I don't think that's out of the realm of what's normal.
Hey, Kathy, I have a quick question for you.
Uh-huh.
So everybody's really focused on the forgiveness portion of the loan, obviously.
Absolutely.
But there's also a certification on the loan that requires the borrower to only use the loan proceeds for very particular permitted purposes. Is the lender tasked with verifying that the loan proceeds have been used for those permitted purposes, or is it mainly the forgiveness that the lender is participating in the review on?
Since we haven't received the guidance on what exactly we should be getting from a customer or borrower, I really couldn't answer that question. My guess is going to be that since you had to submit information, you will be expected to support it somehow.
Okay.
One other thing that I'll add is this coming Tuesday is the first SBA webinar that's going to be presented, and there's thousands of callers that will be calling into that, so they'll hold multiple calls, and each of those calls will be updates each time something else gets released. There'll also be questions and answers, and that's when we as lenders generally get the clarifications aside from what's coming out from the Treasury Department and the SBA. That's why I'll reiterate, next Thursday, we should have some additional information to be able to deliver on that 6 o'clock Zoom webinar that Sabal Palms Bank will be putting on. So if you're interested in more, and Joanne and your group, Jackie, Marina, you all are doing a great job at keeping up with things. Your resources are excellent.
Thank you.
One thing that I do, if I have clients that have questions, I've referred them to your website, to your webinars, because you do have really good information. I think that's one piece that's been helpful for your referrals, is when they get to us, they're pretty well versed.
We've got a pretty big stick.
I hope you have a great holiday season from your customers. That's what I hope.
We hope so too. We really, I mean, it's been a labor of love. It's certainly been a stressful time for us, and this has happened, not to sound whiny, inconveniently vis-a-vis the timing of tax season is not really when you want to dedicate CPA time to not reviewing tax returns. But these businesses are the lifeblood of our community, right? And they're also our clients, our family, our friends. We are a small business, so we really felt an obligation not to turn our backs on people. And I feel like that's one thing I heard come from Sabal Palm was, even if these customers, these businesses were not our customer, they're our fellow community members, and we gotta stick together and bring the whole herd along. So even though I'm sure it wasn't convenient for you guys, and a 1% interest rate probably doesn't cover your cost of the money, what you've done also is going to build, just even in the comments in our chat, thank you so much. It feels great to be working with a local bank and getting personal service. People get wooed away into big banks because there's a branch on every corner and there's an ATM machine everywhere and they can do everything but cure cancer. And then these corrections happen and they say, you know what? You really do need a human being, and there really should be somebody at the bank who knows who I am. And that goes through business, the life of the business completely. We always say, we do lots of business sales, and we see people at the end of their business life selling their business, and they don't have a relationship with a CPA, they don't have a lengthy relationship with a lawyer, and now you're conducting the biggest transaction of your life with, on a first date with a professional, be it the bank, be it the lawyer, or be it the accountant. That's just not a good way to run your business. And this has been a nice opportunity for people who maybe were a little bit casual with the operation of their business to see why it matters. This program is offered through the Small Business Administration. If you ran your business through a personal checking account, it's difficult to be surprised that the SBA is not inclined to help you. You aren't behaving like a business. And I don't mean that to scold anybody or solve the wound at all, but it's just a really easy demonstrative to say, here's why it matters. I spend a lot of time in LLC conversations with folks saying, if you want to avoid Morgan & Morgan for the other people, in any law firm like that, you can't say it's just me. If it's a business, it's not just you. And if you make that argument for them, it's so difficult to maintain your liability protection, to get your tax benefits, to get your PPP benefit, to get a good interest rate on your business loan if you haven't been conducting yourself like a business. So hopefully what comes out of this is that people do take a step back, evaluate, and treat their businesses with more intentional caution so that they are in a better position to be a good law firm client, to be a good bank customer, so that they can benefit their business from using those professional services in the future.
Excellent points, Joanne. And, just going back to your statement of helping those in the community. When you think about a bank our size, which we are a locally owned 100% community bank. I always say we're the pure definition of a community bank. We processed over 700 applications. That's over $70 million were distributed. You think about $70 million in this local economy that went back out to help people pay their rent, buy their groceries, continue paying their health insurance, doing the things that they have worked so very hard to accomplish. Those are the things that a community bank assists with. And I always like to use the term boutique. I consider your firm more boutique. You're hands-on, we're hands-on. We're face-to-face. We answer our phones.
Yeah.
We work with individuals on an individual basis. It is not one size fits all. There's not a silo. One of the successes to this delivery in such a quick way is that this was all hands on deck.
Yeah.
This was not just a handful of people assigned to getting the job done. So when you put all hands on deck, you can accomplish a lot. You can avoid the silos. You can create a process that works very quickly and be able to deliver. And those are all the things that, you know, we as small businesses, I think we're very nimble and can do very well.
Yeah.
Do we like doing it so quickly, so fast, and still be an expert at
Everything?
It's not always a really good feeling, and that's probably where part of the exhaustion comes, but we're working hard to keep up with so much information coming from a government entity. And, you know, I always say, just revert back to what the spirit of this was about. This was about to keep, and I'll quote in the original release of information, the purpose of these funds was to provide capital to cover the cost of retaining employees. Okay? That was the spirit of this. And in hopes that, I hope everyone has maintained their staff or replaced accordingly. And I hope everyone has good records and takes the time to go through the application, listen to as many webinars as you can and hear the comments, the questions, and the dialogue to help you understand your particular case. And I don't know how much time we have left though, but if there's anything else I can add.
There's a couple things you were cutting out earlier, and one person asked, can you review the retention time that you were discussing, because that is something that people didn't catch.
Yeah, the retention time that is actually in the application package that you will be asked to attest to is 6 years.
Okay. From the date of the receipt of the loan?
Yes.
Okay. And then can you tell us again what the webinar time is next Thursday, and the where the people can sign up for the link to that webinar?
Right. So go to www.sabalpalmbank.com, and there will be information there within, by tomorrow, close of business, there'll be information there to log into the webinar, and it will be a Zoom webinar. It's very similar to what we're doing right here. And Neil McCurry, our CEO, will lead that at 6 p.m. on Thursday, next Thursday, a week from today.
Perfect. In the comments, there's lots of kudos to you and your team. I can't say it enough.
It's our pleasure, and I'm glad that we were able to work closely together. You know, there were a lot of other benefits and pluses to come out of this, and some even reconnections with people. I don't know if I should say names, but there's a lot of people out here that we've worked with for many, many years that we were able to reconnect with, and that's really a good feeling, you know?
A couple of questions that Jackie and I sort of, because Jackie loves her detail, and I always say devil's in the detail. So Jackie and I can go back and forth between each other. So we were discussing a couple of, I guess, things that we have read, and I just wanted to run it by you to see how it impacted you. One of the things is, since SBA came up with a couple of different ways that, let's say, partnerships could calculate their loan basis, and partners specifically, and also some of those seasonal businesses that they could now use an alternative period. Have you seen people trying to make changes to the application to increase the basis as recent as last week? Have you seen any of that for yourself?
No. In fact, that the seasonal piece that you talked about, there were very few that we saw that were involved in the seasonal piece. The majority of what we handled, which, as you know, were 1099 self-employed contract workers, and we handled probably as many as the W-2 wage earners that pay their people through W-2s or pay themselves through a W-2. I think this was also a lesson. Joanne, you were talking about this earlier. This was a lesson, and if you want to be a W-2 wage earner, this would have been a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Taking K-1 distributions was not included in this formula.
Exactly.
So it's pick your poison if you want.
That's right.
That was how it was delivered, and it was, again, in the spirit of the program. It was to keep people employed. We might have become a little numb from the downturn originally when businesses lost so many employees. And if you put a dollar amount on the cost of what it is to retain employees versus go back out and rehire, retrain, and maybe they make it 90 days or not, that's an expensive process. So this was probably one of the best solutions, if you think about it, to come up with an 8-week window to give you some lifesaver out there to be able to run your business, maybe do things in your business that you've been wanting to do that you haven't, and you could enlist your employees to help you with that,
Mm-hmm.
and still keep them on the payroll.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully there were a lot of businesses that took advantage of this.
Yeah, lots of places were like, hey, we remodeled, we cleaned up, we spruced things up, things that you just don't have time to do when you are so busy. So that has been a nice opportunity, and having the ability to pay people, then you don't feel like you're paying them for nothing. Something got done. The employee feels like they've contributed to the business in a positive fashion. And sometimes it's been marketing materials we've seen people do. Sometimes it's changes to the physical plant. So it's really been nice to see. One thing we've seen, and I'm sure you've experienced as well too, there's been a lot of kind of coming together. I've seen employees work for free. I've seen employers pay somebody who they didn't have worked for even before the PPP funds came, because they knew that person was maybe single mom and needed the money, and was a key component to their business, and said, I need that person when I get back open. So I need to take care of them. That sort of we're in this together feeling between the employers and the employees has been really nice to witness, particularly right before this. There's, politically and things, there's a lot of divisiveness. And now it seems like, maybe a byproduct of this has been a little bit of coming together and looking out for each other. So hopefully that sticks around.
Yeah.
This can go.
You're right.
I'm all done. I'd like to do something else than read debt forgiveness stuff on a weekend, but
yeah, and we're all with you on that one. I say just get yourself prepared, because the next round is yet to occur, and some of these payrolls were beginning to be issued around the 5th or 6th of April. So there are companies that their 8 weeks will be up in about a week to 10 days.
Yeah.
So here we go again with the next round. So I'm just going to say, be patient with the staff, your staff at the CPA and the law office, Koontz and Associates. Everyone be patient with all of us that are involved in this, because we only have so many people to get so much information completed And this is the critical part, right? We knew that the money was running out. It did run out at the beginning. We got a second round. We were lucky. There's still $100 billion left to be distributed if there are applications. But here we are at the next point, which is the closeout point. And it's going to take a lot of time and effort to handle the number of files. There are millions of files out there to be handled.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to Marina's point that I heard earlier. Just because you got a $3,000 PPP loan doesn't mean you're going to be on a threshold that excludes you from any requirements to have the forgiveness or to not maintain your documentation.
It's
Everyone is subject.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember, this was taxpayer money distributed. Many of us, everybody here on this call has paid in over the years. That's why it was given to the per the Treasury Department to the SBA to disseminate. But when it comes down to, you know, a fiduciary responsibility that the U.S. government has, we have to kind of oblige to follow the rules.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any insight to this. We're getting this question a lot, and I haven't seen any rulings yet. We've got a lot of realtors that we work with, obviously, given that we do closings. And I've had a lot of people say, hey, I'm a realtor. I don't run a payroll. How am I going to document my forgiveness? Because I'm not going to have, you know, pay stubs to show. Do you have any insight to that? Crystal ball, magnifying glass, anything?
Without any specifics directed, I can only go back to, hopefully you had a separate account that you just put your funds into. And of course at Sabal Palms Bank, every dollar went into a separate account. That you have an accounting of you paid yourself and that was your payroll. And at the end of 8 weeks, you can demonstrate that you use those funds to pay yourself.
And by pay yourself, do you think it's adequate if their business bank account is at Sabal Palms and their personal bank account is at Sabal Palms, and they simply make a distribution or transfer online of those funds in basically in an equal amount, either once a month or every 2 weeks through the 8 week period, that they say, okay, this is my draw, which is functioning as my income? Is that your feeling as well? That's what we've kind of been telling people. Good.
That is. You know, divide it by 8, pay yourself weekly, divide it by 2, pay monthly, whatever your math was.
Yeah.
But, you know, as long as you paid yourself and those numbers all balance out at the end, that's what the worksheets are for.
Sure.
And as long as you can demonstrate that through your bank accounts, that was clearly defined in the application package of the instructions, is to have your bank statements.
Sure.
And, you know, those should all be reasonable, that should be reasonable proof to support the request.
Now, Jackie or Marina, can one of you talk about the $15,000 limitation real briefly? We're coming to the top of the hour, so I think we're going to have to let Kathy go. But can one of you talk about why the realtor self-employed folks are going to be capped out at the $15,735 debt forgiveness out of their maximum loan amount?
So there is the limitation that applies to independent contractors and sole proprietors is the lesser of your 2019 net income annualized over that 8 week period, or that $15,000 amount, which is basically $100,000 annualized over that 8 week period. And really all employees are subject to that cap. So that's just taking the cap across the board and applying it to everyone. I actually had a question for you, Kathy, that I'm just curious. I don't know.
You can't resist.
I can't resist. Everybody's going to be digging into this further. And there's actually, there's been some chatter among professionals and practitioners about a particular part of the application that speaks to calculating owner compensation. And it appears to expand the scope of that limitation that I just described that was originally only applicable to independent contractors and sole proprietors. It seems to widen the scope to apply also to partners of partnerships, as well as what they refer to as owner employees. in my opinion, if I am a shareholder employee, I would be an owner employee. So it seems that that limitation I just described was originally only applying to independent contractors and sole proprietors, but now is really applying to all owner employees. Have you noticed any chatter about that within your institution?
That is, and again, you're talking a company that's got interested shareholders. So those are your much larger companies. And those are, I think, topics that are going to be coming up in conversation in the future. Because those are, when you think about it, we assisted with some very large companies in this community, and they're going to be falling into that same situation. So when the clarity comes out, I think that's going to be part of that future explanation of what's going to be qualified, non-qualified.
Perfect.
Yeah. You know, we're in the same boat. I'm a shareholder of Sabal Palms Bank, but what does that mean to me, you know, from that perspective?
Yeah.
So I think there's more definition that has.
Perfect. Kathy, we cannot thank you for your time enough. I really appreciate your willingness to put down PPP for 60 minutes and jump on with us. We'd love to have you back on once there's a little bit more guidance than you have, you know, a little bit more information to share. Just let us know when that is. We'd be happy to bring you back. And if anybody has questions, I have put Kathy's contact details in the webinar chat. You can also reach out to her. We've given her phone number and her email address. If you need that, you can email us and we'll give it to you as well. Thanks again, Kathy. Thanks, ladies. Everyone stay safe, stay well. We will see you next Tuesday at 10 a.m. In the meantime, we will also be continuing to wait for that debt forgiveness guidance. So as soon as we have that, there will be a webinar on that. Stay tuned. We haven't forgotten about it. We are not avoiding it. We are just trying to provide a webinar where we say something besides we're not sure yet. An hour of that gets old.
Hey, thank you all for having me. It was such a pleasure to do this, and thank you for the referrals.
Yes.
All those customers, and again, feel free to call on us for any of your other banking needs or questions. We're here as a soundboard and to help. And Joanne, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Don't forget them when this is over, and all you realtors with all you buyers, let's remember that shop local thing. And you know, somebody might get qualified on Quicken Loans in the middle of the night, but I've closed plenty of those that don't go well. So this is a nice opportunity to band together in that respect too and support all these local businesses. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy your long holiday weekend. Try not to read too much debt forgiveness, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Bye-bye.